My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old, and until last year, I believed in fairy tales. I believed in happy endings, in perfect love, in family. I believed my mother loved me more than anything in the world. I was wrong. So wrong. I want you to imagine this, because I remember every detail like it's carved into my skin. It was the night before my wedding. The air smelled of fresh roses. The entire house was buzzing with excitement. My mother was everywhere, checking the flowers, adjusting the candles, scolding the caterers for being late. She had been my rock through the entire engagement. My maid of honor. My biggest cheerleader. And Ethan, my fiancé, he was everything I ever prayed for. Or at least, I thought he was. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't nerves. It was something else. A strange heaviness in my chest, like my body knew something my mind didn't. I grabbed my hoodie and decided to take a drive, just to clear my head. Mom had left her car in my driveway earlier that evening. I don't know why, but I opened it. The first thing I noticed was the faint smell of Ethan's cologne. I froze. Why would his scent be in her car? I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he left his jacket there once. Maybe they were talking about the wedding and he leaned in. But then, I saw it. A small, leather-bound journal half hidden under the passenger seat. It wasn't fancy, just old, worn, the edges fraying. But the gold letters on the front made my hands go cold. It was my mother's handwriting. I should have put it back. I should have respected her privacy. But my gut, it screamed at me. I opened the journal. At first, it seemed innocent, lists, notes, random thoughts. But as I flipped the pages, my breath caught. Her handwriting changed, shaky, rushed, and the words, oh God, the words. He said he's never felt this alive. I told him we shouldn't, but I couldn't stop. I've never been touched like that before. My eyes blurred. I read it again. And again. There was no name. But there was a date. 2 weeks ago. The next page. We said it would be our secret. Just one night before he marries her. I want him to remember me forever. I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. Her? That's me. She was talking about me. I wanted to throw up. My hands shook so badly I dropped the journal. My brain was screaming, it can't be Ethan. It can't. But the next line crushed whatever hope I had left. I told Ethan I'd always protect him from her anger. He laughed and kissed me again. I remember sitting there, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I stared at those words, praying it was some sick misunderstanding. But the way she described him, his voice, the scar on his jaw, the smell of his cologne, there was no doubt. My mother. My fiancé. The night before my wedding. I don't remember driving back home. I don't remember how I ended up sitting on my bedroom floor, clutching that journal like it was burning my hands. but I do remember the sound in my head. It wasn't crying. It wasn't screaming. It was silence. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. At 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. I peeked through the crack in my door. It was Ethan, coming out of my mother's room. He froze when he saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, that fake smile of his spread across his face. "Couldn't sleep either," he said, like nothing was wrong. I didn't answer. I just looked at him and smiled back. Because in that moment, I knew something he didn't. Tomorrow wasn't going to be my wedding day. It was going to be his reckoning. And what I did next silenced the entire church. I didn't sleep a single second that night. I just sat there, staring at the white lace of my wedding dress hanging in the corner, wondering how something so pure could be surrounded by so much filth. I wanted to scream. To throw the dress in the fireplace and watch it burn. But instead, I smiled. Because while they were busy lying to me, I was already thinking about how to make them pay. Not just pay, crumble. By sunrise, the house was buzzing again. My mom was in the kitchen, fussing over breakfast like she hadn't spent the night betraying her own daughter. Ethan was in the living room, charming my cousins, acting like the man of the hour. I walked past both of them, calm, collected. If they noticed the way I didn't look either of them in the eye, they didn't say a word. What they didn't know was that I'd already made a call. I phoned Jason, my childhood friend, my first crush, and the only person I trusted completely. Jason wasn't just a friend, he was also a brilliant tech guy. The kind who could find anything, record anything, and make sure the right people saw it. I told him, "I need you at the church. Bring the equipment." He didn't ask why. He just said, "Done." By 10 a.m., we were at the venue. Everyone thought I was there early because I was nervous. In reality, I was setting the stage for the most unforgettable wedding anyone had ever seen. Jason hid 2 tiny wireless speakers in the church. One under the altar, the other in the balcony. Then, he connected them to his laptop. On that laptop, sat the audio files I just spent the last 2 hours creating. Remember that journal? It wasn't just words. Tucked between the pages was a small flash drive. I didn't even notice it last night. But when I plugged it into my laptop that morning, I found recordings. Recordings of them. I don't know if my mother had some twisted need to relive it, or if Ethan recorded it without her knowing, but there it was. Her voice. His voice. Laughing. Whispering. Saying things I'll never be able to unhear. I was shaking. Not from sadness anymore, no. From power. Because now, I had proof. Proof that could shatter their lives in front of every person they'd ever wanted to impress. The guests started arriving. Smiling faces, flowers everywhere, cameras flashing. My mother fussed over my veil. Ethan kissed my cheek for the photos. And I smiled, because I knew what was coming. The ceremony began. I walked down the aisle, not as a bride walking toward love, but as an executioner walking toward justice. Ethan took my hands at the altar, grinning like the devil in a suit. The priest began the vows. And then, it happened. Jason, sitting quietly in the back, pressed a single key on his laptop. The church speakers came to life, not with the priest's voice, but with hers. My mother's voice. Ethan, we shouldn't. Then his voice, low, intimate, shoo, no one will know. Gasps filled the room. The priest froze mid-sentence. Guests looked around, confused. And then came the worst part, the laughter. Their laughter. My mother went pale. Ethan's grip on my hands tightened like he could stop me from moving. But I didn't move. I just stood there, smiling at the crowd. People were whispering, covering their mouths, turning to stare at the two of them. The audio kept playing. Every word. Every disgusting detail. And when it finally stopped, the silence was deafening. I looked Ethan straight in the eyes and said, loud enough for the entire church to hear, I knew I couldn't marry you, but I wanted everyone to know why. Gasps. Murmurs. My mother's face crumpled. Ethan tried to speak, but the priest stepped back like he didn't even want to be near him. I walked down the aisle alone, my veil trailing behind me like the final curtain call. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because exposing them was just phase 1. The real revenge was still coming. When I walked out of that church, I didn't just walk away from my wedding. I walked away from everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. But the thing about walking away is that you're free to walk towards something else. And what I was walking toward was destruction. Phase 1, public humiliation, was done. But humiliation fades. People gossip for a few weeks, then they move on. I didn't want them to move on. I wanted Ethan and my mother to live in the ruins of what they'd built. The morning after the wedding, Ethan tried calling. Then texting. Then showing up at my door. He said things like we can explain, and we were drunk, and it was just one mistake. I ignored him. Because while he was wasting time begging, I was digging. I called Jason again. Find out everything about him, I said. Bank accounts. Contracts. Secrets. I don't care how. Turns out, Ethan had more skeletons in his closet than I thought. He'd been siphoning money from his business partner. He had unpaid debts. And here's the kicker, he'd been sending flirty messages to 3 other women during our engagement. I packaged every piece of evidence into a neat little folder. And then I mailed copies, anonymous copies, to his business partner, his landlord, and his parents. The fallout was immediate. His business partner froze his accounts and threatened to sue. His landlord kicked him out. And his parents? They called him a disgrace. Now, my mother. If you think I'd let her off easy just because she's blood, you don't know me. My mother cared about one thing above all else, her reputation in our small, tight-knit community. She was the charity queen, the perfect mom everyone admired. So, I gave the community a front row seat to the truth. At the next town charity event, I showed up early. I donated a special video presentation for the fundraiser. When the lights dimmed, the screen lit up, not with donation numbers, but with excerpts from her own journal. Her handwriting. Her words. Her betrayal, projected 12 feet high for every friend, neighbor, and church member to see. By the time the lights came back on, her cheeks were red, her hands trembling. She tried to leave, but whispers followed her out the door like a shadow she'd never escape. You'd think that would be enough. But I had one more card to play. I waited a week. Let them stew in the ashes. Then, I invited them both to meet me at a cafe. They came separately, but both sat down, probably thinking I wanted to make amends. I didn't. I pulled out 2 envelopes and slid them across the table. One for Ethan, full of legal papers I'd filed to sue him for emotional distress and breach of promise. One for my mother, a letter disowning her, along with a public statement I was releasing to the local newspaper. Ethan cursed at me. My mother cried. I stood up, looked at them both, and said, "You didn't just lose me. You lost everything I ever could have given you." And then I walked away again. But just when I thought it was over, I found out something that made my blood run cold. Something that proved they weren't done hurting me. I thought I'd finished them. I thought I'd burned every bridge, pulled every thread, and left them standing in nothing but smoke and ashes. But life has a way of showing you that some people just don't know when they've lost. 2 weeks after that cafe meeting, I got an email. No subject line. No sender name. Just one sentence. If you think it's over, think again. Attached was a picture of me. Sleeping. In my own apartment. My stomach turned to ice. It wasn't an old picture, it was from that week. Which meant someone had been in my home. I changed my locks the same day. But that night, as I was lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the only 2 people who hated me enough to cross that line. Ethan. And my mother. The next morning, I called Jason again. This time, I wasn't asking for tech help. I was asking for surveillance. He installed cameras, tiny, almost invisible, throughout my apartment. 2 nights later, we caught him. Ethan. Breaking in. Rummaging through my drawers. I don't know what he was looking for, but it didn't matter. Because now, I had video evidence of a felony. I didn't call him. I didn't warn him. I called the police. They arrested him at his new rundown apartment. Breaking and entering. Harassment. Probation violations. Now, my mother. I thought maybe she'd back off after seeing Ethan fall apart. But she didn't. A neighbor told me she'd been going around, spinning some wild story about how I was mentally unstable and had fabricated everything. So I decided to show her just how unstable I could be when pushed too far. I filed for a restraining order. Not just against Ethan, but against her. In court, I presented every piece of evidence, the journal, the audio, the video, the town charity footage. The judge didn't just grant the order. He looked at her and said, "You're lucky your daughter isn't suing you for defamation on top of everything else." That was the last time I saw her face in person. A month later, I heard she'd moved to another state, living in a cramped apartment far from the polished life she once bragged about. Ethan, on the other hand, ended up with a criminal record, no business, and no one left to call. And me? I didn't just survive them. I rebuilt. I traveled. I started a small business. I reconnected with people who actually cared about me. And slowly, the ache in my chest turned into something else. Not joy. Not pride. Peace. Sometimes I still hear their voices in my head. Sometimes I still wake up from dreams where I'm standing in that church, veil over my face, about to marry the man who betrayed me. But then I remember. I didn't marry him. I married my freedom. And here's the funny thing about karma. It doesn't just come for people when you wait for it. Sometimes, you become the karma. And when you do, no one ever forgets your name.